Welcome, everybody, to This Week in Legal Blogging, in which we talk with leading bloggers from across the legal industry. I am Bob Ambrogi. I'm the host. I write the blog Law Sites and also have the podcast Law Next about innovation in law. And this program is presented by LexBlog, providing lawyers with turnkey digital publishing solutions and strategic consulting for 16 years. You can find all the past recordings, video recordings of this program at youtube.com/LexBlog. And this show is also available as an audio podcast, which you can find at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty soon all of your preferred podcast platforms. And I'm very happy to have as our guest today, all the way from San Francisco, Kirk Jenkins, who writes a couple of different blogs about appellate practice and is also a lawyer just as of a few weeks ago with the firm Arnold and Porter out of their San Francisco office. So Kirk, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Bob. I'm delighted to be here. I've been listening to your podcast for years and have learned a lot from you and your guests. So I was delighted to join you.
Oh, well, that's very nice to hear. I'm glad you found it useful at some point. So we're gonna talk about your blogs. You write now two different blogs: California Supreme Court Review and Illinois Supreme Court Review, both of which are dedicated to understanding appellate decision making. But before we talk about the blogs, why don't you tell us a little bit about your practice and what you do?
I am a full-time appellate specialist. I'm currently serving as both the president of the California Academy of Appellate Lawyers and the California State Chair for the ABA's Council of Appellate Lawyers. But the area of my practice that is most directly related to the analytics, you might say, is my academic background is in economics. So I was very used to large columns of figures and very used to thinking about decision making that way. My thesis in school was a regression model of Federal Reserve decision making and interest rate setting, predicting what the Open Market Committee was going to do to interest rates based on data that was available before the meeting. So that, in a sense, my career has come full circle with taking up legal analytics.
So you started the Illinois version of the blog, the Illinois Supreme Court Review, in 2015, and then followed with the California Supreme Court Review. And as you just alluded to, the blog is focused on using data analytics to help analyze, I guess, appellate practice. What does that mean? What do you do?
Well, the central goal of it for purposes of assisting an appellate lawyer's practice is to quantify risk. We have all been making those observations to our clients for years, I'm sure for centuries. This litigation is very this jurisdiction is very pro-defendant, this judge is very pro-plaintiff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's data to understand all of that at this point, comprehensive data for virtually every jurisdiction. And that's what we do with the appellate decision making. The history of analytics vis-a-vis appellate decision making goes back 100 years. It's been in the academic community for all that time, and it's a very powerful insight because first and foremost, you're trying to persuade the decision makers. Very powerful insight into how they make their decisions. And it gives you the ability to tell your client more precisely exactly what the risk is. For example, you come back from an oral argument and rather than saying, well, I felt like we got all our points out and they were listening and they were well prepared, be in a position to say something based on the data from the last 15 years, our chances of prevailing based on what you just saw are roughly 72%. That's something that clients understand and they can work with. I used an example in an article that I wrote several years ago. I tried the difference between offering your client a $1 billion package of mortgages to buy on the one hand, versus offering him the same package and saying, okay, based on the last 15 years, this many are going to pay out early, this many are going to pay out on time, and this many are going to go into default. The second example, the client knows how to deal with that in a way that the first example, you can't manage risk if you can't measure it. And that's why analytics is such a powerful tool.
I can't help but think that we're having this conversation in the week that Supreme Court confirmation hearings have been going on in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely, because there are a lot of different ways that you can zero in on a judge's performance. There is work out there on text analytics. The theory is that there are certain markers in a judge's writings that don't change from one opinion to the next, from one year to the next, that can tell you the judge's attitudes based on how they write. You can tell, it put precision to things like this judge rules for plaintiffs in this kind of case a very high percentage of the time, more so than his or her colleagues, or a low percentage of the time. It's fairly straightforward to prepare a comprehensive report with analysis of a judge's history.
But I haven't heard anything about that in the hearings this week. It would be interesting to know if that exists, and it probably does. But so when you talk about the data analytics here, what's the data? Are you compiling a database of the court's, in particular, justices' writings and opinions?
Yes. The beginning of this, before the two blogs were started, as I say, it really has its beginnings in the academic tradition. There is a database out there that you can do a Google search for. It's freely available to anyone, called the Supreme Court Database, that was founded by professors Harold Spaeth and fairly early on, Jeffrey Siegel joined them. And at this point, several more professors joined after that. At this point, it contains data on every decision the United States Supreme Court has ever handed down, and roughly 100 to 150 variables on every single one. Well, that was my model for what I did in both Illinois and California. Depending on the year, I have between 125 and 150 variables for every case those two courts have decided since 1990. So there is virtually no question about those courts' performances over the last 30 years that I can't answer, as long as I have the time to go to the data.
I mean, in some ways, it almost sounds like a blog. I mean, a product more than a blog. How did you make the decision to launch a blog as a way of bringing this data and this information to your readership?
Well, I believe that blogging is, in a lot of ways, taking over what was once the place of law reviews, in bringing authoritative commentary to a wider audience. I mean, the fraction is probably higher among appellate specialists, but asking lawyers out there, when was the last time you read a law review article? It takes a fairly long time to get them into print, goes through a lot of review, and it's a very formalized process. And one of the things I've noticed since I've been doing this is that a lot of my posts begin with me musing, I wonder if, and then a question follows. Well, I go to the data and figure it out. And since a lot of times those are things that people have been talking about, conventional wisdom sorts of things, the thing you can do on a blog that you could never do on a law review is you've still got to post if you discover that the answer to I wonder if is no rather than yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to demonstrate that a lot of things that the California appellate bar has been saying as conventional wisdom for years really aren't true through using the data.
Yeah. So essentially, you see yourself as your blog as a medium for publishing your research into appellate law in California and Illinois.
That's exactly right. Absolutely. And it has, in particular, in Illinois, it has, well, there are judges that read it regularly in both states, but the Illinois blog has been cited by the Intermediate Appellate Court in Illinois for its expertise on the Illinois Supreme Court. So it does get around and has gotten around in both states.
So who are you writing this for? Who do you see as your audience? Is it other appellate practitioners? Is it judges? Is it, all of the above?
Well, a little bit all of the above, but fundamentally, this is a tool to assist my practice and the practices of people like me that are in the position I'm in. I made a decision in dealing with the data early on, dividing it between civil and criminal. My definition of criminal cases is idiosyncratic because it is basically anything that the law firms that I've worked for wouldn't necessarily handle. So a lawyer will tell you that habeas corpus, for example, is a civil proceeding, but I've got it on the criminal side because if you put it on the civil side, it then corrupts the database. But ultimately, it is to put me in a position to be able to tell my clients one step at a time through the life of the case, based on the data, what is most likely to happen, and help us to focus in on the best way to get to a majority of the panel.
So are other appellate practitioners, other lawyers coming to you and saying, could you look into this for me and write about this question I have? Or is that happening?
Yes, I get those calls. I have gotten calls, just to take the first example that comes to mind, from clients that are actually using other lawyers that want to know things like, what does this mean and how long is the wait going to be? When is the decision going to come down? And all sorts of things like that. And we have precise data that really goes through every step of the case. We have in California, we have the timing data based on an ABA study of a number of years ago, dividing the appellate process into every step. I can tell you the average lag time from step A to step B to C, and so on, for every case in the last 30 years.
So how do the people who read your blog use that information? Do they use it to inform the arguments that they present to the court, or the cases they take to an appellate court?
I think not necessarily the cases, but the way other lawyers would use it in assembling a case is to better understand the record of a particular judge when they're going to one of these courts. We all have a general perception. Justice A is more conservative than Justice B, Justice C, and so on. But in both Illinois and California, it's actually a good bit more complicated than that. And we treat judges in dealing with appellate courts in a way similar to the way politicians do, as if they're completely independent decision makers. And what A thinks doesn't have any impact on B, doesn't have any impact on C. In fact, the scholarship demonstrates that that's completely wrong, such that, for example, just to take one study, holding constant for ideology in, for lack of a better term, gender-related cases, gender discrimination, gender harassment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A male judge will move in the plaintiff's direction if he's sitting with women on the panel. So you have to take all of that into account in estimating your chances. And there is a cohesion problem. For example, in Illinois, one of the reasons that it's been Democratic controlled for years, but one of the reasons that it hasn't moved more in a leftward direction is that the Republicans vote together a good bit more often than the Democrats do. So if you've got three distinct positions from the Democratic justices and the Republicans are all signing on to the same opinion, you carry the day a lot. And the discussion that's going on in DC right now, oh my gosh, it's going to be this way or that way. It really depends on panel cohesion in a way that not that many people are talking about.
So Judge A, who rules a particular way, who might be expected to rule a particular way, might actually rule in a different way depending on who else is on the panel and what the nature of the matter is that's being presented to the panel.
That's absolutely right. And the judges, of course, like all of us, don't have cookie cutter opinions on these things. There are Democratic judges. Just to take California, for example, I would place the Democratic appointees at significantly different points on the ideological spectrum, particularly in criminal cases, whereas the Republican appointees tend to be much more liberal than what you might think is the Republican mainstream around the country. And one of the things I'm going to be watching as it becomes more and more a Democratic court with the incoming Justice Jenkins and the Brown appointees and et cetera, is whether the Republicans who are left move leftwards and begin ruling in a more pro-plaintiff way.
I see from your blog that you do, or you've been doing, I guess, a number of kind of historical retrospectives. I mean, for example, I'm looking at what kinds of tort cases does the Supreme Court decide? What are you doing there? What's the purpose of those, and how do those help you or your readership?
Well, for example, you're sitting with a tort case on your desk, and obviously tort is a big area, and it can be subdivided into various sub areas and probably even sub areas. And from one year to the next, the court will be in most of those areas over time, but they're not solely a torts court. So they spend some time in one area and they then move on to another area and that sort of thing. So you narrow down what is the court interested in, what has the court been doing for the last few years, and you can better zero in on what your chances of getting your particular case to the court are, either because it's in the area that you're talking about, or you can explain to the court how it impacts that area that the court has been writing about a lot in recent years.
Yeah. So Kirk, you were an appellate lawyer before you started these blogs. Has starting these blogs had any impact on your practice or your career?
Absolutely. It has made a lot of what has happened over the last 8 or 10 years possible. People, I get calls fairly frequently based on people that, believe it or not, have done Google searches. And by people, I'm including corporate folks doing Google searches looking for expertise in a certain area, either a geographical area or an area of the law. And we have exited the time when, to a great extent, the time when stereotypical business development, doing deals on the golf course, is really all you need. It has become
especially
siloed.
This year.
Yeah, it has become siloed in the sense that you have to be able to have your expertise on display on the internet. When I was the national chair of appellate at Sedgwick, I used to tell the other lawyers in my group, if someone can get on Google and put your name in, and they don't know what your expertise is within 3 minutes, you're doing it wrong, because you frequently don't get any longer than that. And I've had clients, corporate clients, tell me that they decided they needed an appellate lawyer in this jurisdiction, and it didn't take them long on the internet to figure out who the expert was.
Well, and yours is not the only appellate blog out there on the internet, but I have to think that yours is the only appellate blog focused on appellate analytics. As this, is this unique to you, or is there anybody else doing this?
Well, there is empirical SCOTUS, which is out there. There's not tons of it, but it's only going to increase because obviously the world is going in that direction, and it is becoming more crucial these days with the things that the society is wrestling with, things like racial disparities, because we talk a lot about, well, the rule of law. That's what the law is. And whatever the actual decisions are, that's what the law is. But if you can demonstrate through analytics, and this has been demonstrated again and again and again, things like impacting a panel decision based on who's on the panel, things like disparate impact on jurors, things like disparate sentencing. The very first appellate analytics article that was ever written was in 1924, and it was about disparate sentencing. So we've been fighting that for a long time. So it is a crucial tool to penetrate the defense. It's the rule of law. There's nothing that can be done, by showing how it operates in practice and forcing people to think about, is there something that needs to be done here?
Yeah. I know you were also, until fairly recently, writing a third blog called Appellate Strategist, which I guess is kind of on a hiatus right now. But how do you find the time to, I mean, these look like they must be a lot of work and very time consuming to write some of the posts that you write. How do you work that into your practice schedule?
Well, actually, it will take us off topic a little bit. So just a 15-second drop in. I actually have another blog. I have a personal blog on my website, kirkjenkins.com, but there's no law on that. So,
which is about what?
The tagline is a blog about Shakespeare, the U.S. Civil War, classic era baseball, and maybe even a bit of quantum mechanics now and then.
I want to go have a beer with you when this pandemic is over.
I am in the process of, we're hopefully going to revive the Appellate Strategist blog soon. Candidly, the data work for the two analytics blogs currently is taking a great deal of time. I am working on a predictive algorithm for both Illinois and California put it on a better computer statistical platform, and hopefully cut the time way down as part of the answer to your question. And I also have an analytics book in mind that I want to get started writing. But it helps to have an elastic definition of what the workday constitutes. My second book was written entirely between midnight and 2 a.m. from beginning to end.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a schedule around it? I mean, do you post on a regular schedule, or is it as the mood strikes you?
Both of the analytics blogs are on a regular schedule. The ideal is for Illinois to post on Tuesday and Wednesday, and California to post on Thursday and Friday. That has slipped a little bit in some weeks, but the guarantee is that there will be 2 new posts on each blog every single week. And I've done that 52 weeks a year ever since those 2 blogs opened.
Yeah. I hope this isn't a delicate question, but you've moved firms since you've been writing this blog. I think a couple of times since you started these blogs. Has that at all been an issue? Have you been? If the blogs always belonged to you and moved with you?
Yes. All 3 of the blogs that you mentioned, including Appellate Strategist, we started that in the appellate group at Sedgwick, and the 2 Supreme Court reviews have always been my project. There was 1 guest post on the Illinois blog, but other than that, I've completely written both of them. And to the credit of the 2 firms, there has never been any debate about my ability to take them with me.
Yeah. And what about marketing or building up a readership for your blog? What have you done in that regard, or has it just been kind of organic?
It is crucial for blog writers to cross-promote their work on other social media platforms. Everything that I do, I cross-promote over onto LinkedIn. Both of the statistical blogs have Twitter feeds that are dedicated to them in their names. The Flipboard platform I've used a lot to cross-promote the blog. About a year and a half ago, I took a very close look at the Google Analytics on the sites, and it turns out that the people who come in through social media links outnumber the people who actually go straight to the URL 20 to 1. So that's the crucial step to understand that you're not done by a long shot when you hit publish on the blog.
Right. What have you learned about blogging? What advice do you have for others who are maybe new to blogging or just thinking about starting it? What have been the lessons that have been important to you in your own blogging?
It's imperative that you find something that you feel strongly about, because ultimately what you're doing, and if you're fortunate, it's something that you can figure out a way to really benefit your practice in the sense of benefiting your clients. But that's sort of the second step. The first step is I can get excited about this subject, whether it's eminent domain law. There's a story, I believe one of our colleagues on the LexBlog network, equine law, whatever it is, because it's going to take time. And if you do it as oh geez, I've got to roll out a blog post, it's not going to go anywhere. So find something that you can use as your niche. This is why I'm not just another accomplished appellate lawyer. I do this, and something that you feel strongly about. It's the old cliche about find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. There's some truth to that with blogging. As I said at the outset, I was looking at giant columns of numbers and trying to predict human behavior nearly 40 years ago in college. So it's a very comfortable place for me and something that I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, you might want to remind yourself of that at 2:00 in the morning when you're working on your next book. But it's been a real pleasure to speak. Any other closing words or final words that you want to mention before we wrap up today?
Blogging is a career-changing experience. If you feel strongly enough about it to really commit to it in the way that I was talking about as a tool to differentiate yourself, not to channel my inner economist, but and if you're fortunate to do something you're passionate about, it changes your career. The last 10 years of my career, I suspect would have been very different if I hadn't gone in these directions. And it's just been amazing.
Well, that's good to hear. And I'm glad to hear that. And I really appreciate you are taking the time today to tell us about your blog and about your practice. It's been really interesting. And I will be an avid reader going forward, even if I'm not in California or Illinois. I think it's fascinating what you're doing. I'm fascinated by analytics and law generally, and really interested in what you're doing. So thanks a lot.
My pleasure, Bob.
And just for anybody watching or listening, the two blogs are the California Supreme Court Review and the Illinois Supreme Court Review. And not surprisingly, you can find them at CaliforniaSupremeCourtReview.com and IllinoisSupremeCourtReview.com. And we are going to be back next week where our guest is going to be Lisa Stamm, who's the publisher of the Employment and Human Rights Law in Canada blog. So watch for that, same time, same place. Again, a reminder, you can find all of the past episodes of this on YouTube at youtube.com/LexBlog, or check us out on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. On behalf of everybody at LexBlog, this is Bob Ambrogi. Thanks a lot for watching and or listening.